hit him with a restraining bolt.
Thanks to @Meshlanrid for my sub gift.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Obi-Wan Jacoby. Welcome in. And I see Wraith and a couple of other people lurking in the shadows, which is completely fine. That happens a lot around here. All right. I'm hoping that my audio isn't completely jacked because the last stream that I had, it was. So cross your fingers, my friends. Pray, whatever you want to do. All right. Moving the windows over here. Give me a sec. Alrighty. Before we get started this evening, I just want to thank all of you who were here for my last stream, which was on April 20th, which was my fundraiser for Starlight. I am extremely grateful for those of you who were here, and for those of you who donated, and even if you just hang out, that's totally cool too. I'm really, really thankful for the support for Starlight Children's Foundation, as they are a organization that I care a lot about and what they do. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about them, the fundraiser is actually still active until I believe April 14th. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what they do, check this out. Alright. How in the world do we get fingerprints everywhere? I swear. It's all good. So, now let's get started properly this evening. Good evening, everyone, and of course, welcome back to the Galactic Archives and our writing workshop series. This space in particular it's calm, and it's where we explore how stories breathe and how emotional movement happens beneath the surface of the story itself. My name is Meshla. I'm a long-form storyteller and world builder, and here in the archives we spend time looking not just at what happens in a story, but how it moves, how it holds tension, and how it carries emotion, sometimes long before anything visibly changes. If you're new here, you're always welcome to simply listen. You don't even have to take notes if you don't want to. You don't even have to respond in chat if that's not your thing. These workshops are designed to be followed at your own pace, something that you can sit with, return to, and absorb slowly over time. And tonight, we're stepping into a different kind of tension. It's not action, it's not even confrontation, but something that comes before both. Turn that down a little bit on my end. Let me know if the music is too loud. I had to actually turn it down in my headphones. Let me get some water here. In tonight's workshop, we will be exploring rising dread without action. This is the space in a story where something is wrong, but nothing has actually happened yet. There's no attack, there's no visible escalation, and there's no clear danger that anyone can point to. And yet, everything feels like it's tightening. The air shifts, conversations carry weight that they didn't before, and silence becomes loud. In Steps into the Past, chapters 15 and 16, they carry this kind of tension with remarkable restraint. We'll move through a war room conversation that never becomes an actual battle, quiet training that never turns into combat, and healing scenes that never become a crisis, and corridors where nothing happens and yet everything is being watched. And beneath all of it, there's a single growing awareness. Something is coming. It's not confirmed, it's not even visible, but it's definitely felt. And that feeling is what we'll be studying tonight. Oh, and before I continue, say hello to my little friend. I have a little dragon. I haven't given him a name yet. But I picked him up at PAX, and he is my best friend right now. So, hello, little dragon. It's my little buddy. He's just gonna sit up here on my computer and watch over everything. You know how treasures have dragons to guard them? The archive now has a dragon to guard it. So, there you go. All right. What dread without action actually means. When we talk about dread in writing, many people instinctively think of escalation. The stakes are louder, it's faster pacing, there's a visible threat, and there's an obvious external danger. But dread doesn't actually begin there. Dread often begins in recognition without confirmation. It lives in instincts that don't align with available evidence, patterns that almost, but not quite, repeat, and spaces where characters feel that something is wrong, but they can't yet prove it or put their finger on it. And because of that, writing dread in story is not about intensity. It's about control, of pacing, of silence, and of what is not said. There's also something important here. Something that we'll return to throughout this workshop. Writing dread ethically. Dread can be powerful, but it can also be overwhelming if it's mishandled. So when we say writing dread ethically, what we mean is we're allowing the tension to build without trapping the reader. We're maintaining our reader's trust even when uncertainty increases, and we're ensuring that emotional pressure does not become disorientation. In these two chapters, dread is definitely present, but it's anchored. It's anchored through character relationships, environmental grounding, and consistent behavioral patterns. We hope that the reader is never lost, even when the characters themselves are uncertain. When you're learning to write dread without action, you can gain access to something powerful. You can build tension without relying on conflict escalation. I actually see that a lot in stories. You can deepen emotional stakes before plot twists occur, and you can create atmosphere that carries across multiple scenes, which allows readers to feel what the characters feel before they actually understand why. And perhaps most importantly, you can make a moment matter before anything actually happens. As we move forward and deeper into chapters 15 and 16, I want you to listen for something very specific. Not what changes, but what tightens. Not the words that are said, but those that are held back. And not where the danger is, but where the characters begin to actually feel it. As you settle into tonight's workshop, you might quietly consider this. When was the last time a story made you feel uneasy before anything actually happened? And what created that feeling? You don't have to answer in chat if you don't want to, just something to think about, whether it's in a story that you read or one that you're currently writing. Alright. Sorry. Make sure I have all my water tonight, because I'll be talking a bunch. I'm curious. For those of you who are here in chat, have you read a story or a scene that made you feel uneasy before anything actually happened? Think about that. I can think of a couple instances right off the top of my head. Also, I might keep this little guy next to me, maybe. Well, he's over there at least. I have to think of a name for him. As we move into our primary case study, I want to shift how we're reading through and analyzing these chapters. We're not reading for plot progression per se. We're not even reading for what happens next. Instead, we're looking at the pressure, at the way tension accumulates quietly through posture, environment, and the small adjustments characters make when something doesn't feel right. Chapters 15 and 16 are especially effective because they don't rely on visible escalation. They rely on alignment. Multiple characters in different locations throughout the chapters are responding to that same invisible shift. And when that happens, the reader begins to feel it too. Let's begin in the war room. On the surface, this is a strategic conversation. Information is being exchanged, reports are being reviewed, and orders are being clarified. Nothing is wrong, yet. And yet, that's precisely where the dread begins to take hold. The language in the room is measured and controlled. No one raises their voice. No one overreacts. But the content of what was being said begins to misalign. The patterns are too clean. Movements are too precise. The suggestion arises that what they're seeing is not random. It's being guided, and yet no one can actually prove it. This is one of my most important techniques in writing dread. The moment where logic begins to fracture and fray, but there's not enough information to actually act on. The characters recognize the possibility of manipulation, but they don't have evidence. So what do? They tighten. They pull back. Notice how the response is not immediate escalation. Instead, we see these things. They increase their caution. They use more deliberate and broad language. They emphasize the need for verification and a shift toward mistrust of the people that they've been watching. Even something as simple as the instruction to treat all incoming information as potentially compromised changes the emotional landscape of the scene. No actual danger has appeared, but now everything could potentially be dangerous. Yes. I was kind of thinking that in the back of my brain. That's an excellent observation, Wraith. So it's these, we've kind of touched on these two chapters before, but in a different context. So now we're looking at them in this context and being able to understand what's happening when there's no actual like action scenes, which can be a challenge to write that way. That shift from a known threat to something that's uncertain is where dread begins to take root. Because uncertainty expands the field of danger, it removes the boundaries of safety, and it creates a space where the characters can't rely on what they normally trust, or who. The language of containment. Another detail worth noticing is how controlled the dialogue is. As even as suspicion increases, the tone doesn't break. There are no dramatic declarations. No one names the fear directly or the people. Instead, we see something more effective. Containment. Words and phrases become shorter. Statements are more deliberate. And the silences lengthen. This matters because dread isn't built through emotional release. It's built through, in fact, the opposite. Emotional restraint. If the characters panic, the reader processes the danger quickly. But if the characters hold, the reader may begin to feel the pressure along with them. From strategic unease to physical environment. After the war room, we move into the training circle. And this transition is important because the dread doesn't stay confined just to strategy in talks of combat. It follows the characters into other physical spaces. On the surface, the training circle is calm, the environment is grounded. The stone floors are warmed smooth over time. Cool air moves through the slats in the windows around the space, and familiar routines and practices resume. Everything about the setting suggests stability and routine, and yet, Marin can't fully settle into it. Environmental stability versus internal instability. This contrast is critical. The environment around Marin is steady, but Marin herself is not. And because of that, the environment begins to feel fragile. Not because the environment itself has actually changed, but because the character's relationship to it has. Marin attempts to move through familiar patterns. Akata, controlled breathing, deliberate motions, but the memories of Collier interrupt, not as a full-on flashback, but as an intrusive sensation, a disruption, and a fracture in her continuity. And that's what is important in the scene, and how it's handled. She doesn't have a dramatic collapse. It doesn't escalate into crisis. Instead, we see her hesitate. Her breath catches, her movement slow, and her posture tightens. This is often how dread can manifest physically, not through actions, but through interruptions of normal behavior, which Marin does a lot in this particular chapter. Jared, anchoring without forcing a resolution. Jared's role in the scene in the training circle is especially important. He doesn't try to fix the moment or smooth it over. He doesn't push Marin past it. He simply redirects her attention back to the present, back to the physical space that she's in, and back to the things that she can control. Not there, here. That kind of grounding is subtle, but it serves a crucial function. It prevents the dread from overwhelming the scene, or Marin herself, and it gives the reader a foothold. This is part of writing dread ethically. You allow the tension to exist, but you also provide anchors for the characters and for the readers. Without those anchors, the readers can become lost. And with them, the reader can stay engaged and present in the scene. Greer, the presence of watchfulness. At the edge of the scene, Greer remains mostly silent, but his presence matters, because he represents something different from Jared. Jared is the emotional grounding, and Greer is the external vigilance. He is watching, tracking, assessing. He's not reacting, but he's certainly ready to. And even though nothing happens in the scene, that watchfulness contributes to the overall sense of unease, because it signals to the reader that someone expects something to happen, even if they don't know what or who. As we move into the corridor scenes, something shifts again. The dread becomes quieter. It's more contained, more internalized. We see this in the interaction between Aran and Greer. There are no actual words, but more importantly, there are unspoken exchanges, small gestures, brief looks, and subtle acknowledgments of shared understanding. And what they're acknowledging is not just Marin's condition. It is the pattern around her, the repetition, and the sense that something is happening again, even if they can't yet see it clearly. This is another key technique. Dread spreads through shared awareness of Marin herself, but also those around her. When multiple characters independently recognize that something is wrong, the reader begins to trust that perception, even when they don't have a confirmation. In the healing scenes, the tone softens, but the dread does not disappear. It simply changes form. Callista approaches Marin with care. She uses gentle language. Her touch is measured, and her presence is steady and reassuring. But even beneath that, there's recognition. She understands what Marin is not saying. She understands that Marin is holding something back, and she chooses not to force Marin to talk about it. This restraint is important because it preserves Marin's agency, which we've talked about before, and it keeps the emotional tension intact. Dread doesn't always come from danger. Sometimes it comes from what can't be spoken of yet. Veil communication, or structured silence. One of the most effective elements in these two chapters is the use of silent communication, gestures, signals, and small movements that carry meaning. These exchanges do two things at the same time. They maintain operational clarity, and they reinforce the sense that something must be handled carefully, quietly, and without drawing attention. And that quiet handling can create tension on its own, because it implies that the situation is delicate, potentially volatile, and not yet ready to surface. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes, my friends. But I will keep going. Environmental echo. The mountain holds. Across all of these scenes, the environment remains consistent. The mountain, the stone around them, and the quiet. That consistency becomes an anchor all of its own. But it also creates a contrast, because as the characters begin to feel the tightening pressure, the stillness of the environment starts to feel like containment. It's not exactly peaceful, but like it's waiting for something. That's what I like to call an environmental echo. The setting itself doesn't change, but the meaning shifts based on the emotional state of the characters within it. The accumulation of pressure. By the time we reach the end of these scenes, something has changed. Not externally, but internally for the characters themselves. They are more cautious, more watchful, and more restrained. Their posture has shifted, their interactions have tightened and gone quiet, but their awareness has expanded. And yet, no action has occurred. This is the core of rising dread. Change without event, and pressure without release. As you sit with these scenes, you might quietly consider, where in your own writing does tension begin? And are you allowing it to build before something happens, or only after? Think about that. And it doesn't have to be your work. It could be a story that you read that someone else wrote. Different authors handle these things differently. Alright, I'm gonna add, yep, our ad's gonna start in about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Alright, so I will start a little bit on the next part, which is going to focus on secondary examples. As we move into our secondary examples, we're going to widen our lens slightly, not to leave these chapters behind, but to understand how the kind of dread that we've been observing doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a larger pattern across the entire arc, a pattern of quiet tightening that begins long before any visible escalation. Dread as continuation, not as a beginning. One of the most important things to recognize is that the dread in chapters 15 and 16 doesn't start there. It continues. If we look back briefly at earlier points and steps into the past, we can see the groundwork being laid. Marin's recovery after Bastille, the instability of memory and bodily response, the early reintroduction to controlled environments like the training circle, and the careful, watchful presence of the others around her. These moments were not written as dread. They were written as recovery. But recovery, when handled honestly, already contains tension, because it's fragile, it's incomplete, and because it exists alongside the memories that haven't yet settled. So by the time we reach chapters 15 and 16, the story doesn't need to introduce dread. It only needs to shift the conditions, and the reader feels that. This is an important principle. Dread is often most effective when it emerges from something that's already been established, not when it is introduced suddenly and abruptly. I'm actually going to stop there. Actually, yeah, we got about 30 seconds, so I'm going to finish this little section right here. And let's return back to Workshop 3 for a second. In Workshop 3, we talked about quiet tension, stillness that holds pressure, and moments where nothing moves but everything feels suspended. In Workshop 6, we're seeing something related but different, not stillness, but tightening. I'm going to pause there because we're about to be in an ad. Go get yourselves a drink of water. I will be right back. Oh goodness. Hold on, I'll be right back. There we go. Welcome back, my friends. Minor technical difficulties. I really do hope that you took the minute and a half to go get a drink of water or have a stretch or grab a snack. That's honestly what those breaks are for, because I can't control the fact that we have them. So take advantage of those. Quiet tension often feels like the character might be holding their breath, they're waiting for something, or they might feel suspended between moments. Rising dread can feel like the space around them is narrowing. They are increasingly sensitive to events around them or sensations, and they might feel an expanding awareness of possible danger. Both of these are quiet, and both of these avoid overt action. But the emotional direction is different. Quiet tension holds, while dread advances. And what's powerful in these chapters is how seamlessly the story can transition from one to the other without a clear dividing line and without a visible shift. Cross-character alignment. Another important technique that carries across the arc is multi-character alignment. We see this not only in these chapters, but in earlier ones as well. Jared sensing shifts in Marin before she names them, Greer adjusting the perimeter and watch patterns before a threat is confirmed, Callista recognizing emotional strain before Marin speaks of it, and Aran responding to something he cannot fully articulate, but instinctively understands. Each character is responding to something slightly different, but the direction of their response is generally the same. They are all becoming more attentive, more restrained, and more deliberate in their actions. This alignment can create a subtle reinforcement loop. The reader may not consciously track each individual's behavior, but collectively it creates the sense that everyone is preparing for something. And when everyone prepares without knowing exactly why, that is where dread takes root. Environmental echo across the arc. We also see this echo used consistently across earlier chapters, where the mountain is described, the training circle, the corridors in the Durza estate, and the gardens beyond. These spaces remain stable, but their emotional weight shifts depending on the emotional state of the characters. Earlier, the training circle represented grounding, familiarity, and rebuilding. In Chapter 15, it still holds those same meanings, but it also carries interruption, memory, and hesitation post-Collier. The space itself hasn't changed, but the emotional context definitely has. This is an important tool because it allows you as the writer to reuse the environment while evolving its meaning, which can deepen continuity and strengthen the reader's immersion. The use of silence across multiple scenes. Silence can appear throughout the arc, and not just in these two chapters, but its function evolves as the story moves. Earlier silence may have represented rest, recovery, or space to breathe. In chapters 15 and 16, the silence begins to carry something else. It could mean that someone is withholding information, that they have an unspoken concern, or an awareness that cannot yet be given voice. The shift is subtle, but it's actually pretty effective. Because the silence becomes active. It's no longer empty or neutral, but it's filled with implication or dread. And when the silence becomes active like it is here, the readers begin to listen or read more closely. The absence of action as a technique, which I do a lot of, actually. Across all of our examples so far, there's one shared characteristic. Nothing visibly escalates. There are no fights, there are no sudden dramatic reveals, or sudden dramatic confrontations. And yet, the emotional intensity still increases. This is worth emphasizing because it's counterintuitive for many writers, and me to a degree. We're often taught that tension requires action, that stakes must be demonstrated, and that something must happen for the story to be interesting. But these chapters demonstrate, actually, the exact opposite. Tension can grow through awareness alone, whether it's the characters or the readers. This could be awareness of patterns, of change around them, or awareness of something that doesn't quite fit. Have you ever been reading a scene or even been somewhere where something just felt off? I have. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a lot of little pieces that don't quite align. And because the awareness of these things is shared between multiple characters, it becomes pretty hard to ignore. Ethical dread across the arc. It's important to note that even as the dread in these chapters increases, the story continues to provide grounding for our characters. Hey, Baby G, welcome in. Good to see you. This grounding is provided through relationships, consistent behavior, clear spatial awareness, and emotional anchors like Jared and Callista. This helps ensure that the reader is never overwhelmed, even when the characters themselves might feel uncertain or overwhelmed. This is what helps make the dread sustainable and what allows it to carry forward into future chapters. I hope you're well this evening, Mammy. It's good to see you again. As we move into our section covering applied craft, we're going to take everything we've observed and discussed so far and begin translating it into tools that you can actually use. Not just how to recognize dread, but how to build it, how to control it, and how to review and edit for it. As you think about your own stories or one that you have read, you can consider this. Do the environments and supporting characters reinforce the same emotional direction, or are they pulling in different directions without intention? Something to think about. Like I said, this could be something that you're writing yourself or a story that you've read. And that's kind of why I'm doing these workshops, is I want to help people kind of analyze what they're writing or reading to become a more effective reader, but also a more effective writer. That's why we're here, of course. Part 4. Applied craft. As we move into this segment on applied craft, we're going to shift from observation into practice. Up to this point, we've been looking at how Rising Dread is constructed in chapters 15 and 16, how it moves through behavior, the environments, and shared awareness. Now, we're going to translate that into something that hopefully you can actually use, something that you can return to while drafting or revising or even just thinking through a scene that doesn't quite feel right. Building dread without action, a structured approach. The first thing to understand is that dread is not something that you add at the end of a scene. It's something that you want to layer in from the beginning. If you're writing a scene where something will eventually go wrong, you don't start with that thing that is suddenly wrong. You start with what's almost right but feels weird. This might look like information that fits, but it's too neat. A pattern that repeats, but something is slightly off. And a space that feels familiar, but it's not quite comfortable for your characters. What you're doing here is creating micro misalignments, small, almost imperceptible deviations from what is normal. And importantly, you don't explain them. You allow the characters to notice, to hesitate, and to adjust. That hesitation is where dread begins. 2. Pacing fear and slowing down instead of accelerating. One of the most common instincts when writing tension is to speed things up. Shorter sentences, faster movements, and more frequent tone or beat changes in the scene. But dread often works better in the opposite direction. You slow it down. You allow for longer descriptions of small actions. You allow for extended pauses between dialogue and attention to breath, posture, and sensory details. This can do two things. It gives the reader time to notice the same things that the character does, and it prevents the moment from resolving too quickly. Okay. In chapters 15 and 16, we see this clearly in the pacing of the war room conversation, the deliberate movements in the training circle, and the quiet exchanges in the corridor. Nothing is rushed, and because nothing is rushed, everything has more weight. 3. Environmental echo, or letting the setting carry the tension. Instead of changing the setting to reflect the tension, you can allow the setting to stay the same and change how it's perceived. For example, a quiet room can feel peaceful in one scene, suffocating in another, and watchful in yet a third scene. The physical details of the room do not change, but the emotional context does. Daz!
You're a feisty little one. Fit him with
Thank
a restraining
you.
bolt.
I appreciate you, sir. Welcome back to the Galactic Archives crew, officially. Good to see you here this evening. When you do this, you create continuity, and you allow tension to build without needing external escalation or external events to cause that. To apply this in your own stories, you can ask yourself, what? Oh, goodness. Thank you for the subscription. To apply this to your own work, you can ask yourself, what does this space normally represent? And how does that meaning shift right now with this scene? Ooh. Tightening character posture. Physical signs of dread. Dread often shows up in the body before it shows up in our actions. Characters might stand more rigidly, they might hold their breath, or they might hesitate before moving. They could even become more deliberate or slow in their speech. These are all small changes, but they're incredibly effective because they signal to the reader that something has shifted, even if the character hasn't given it a name yet. In revising and editing, this is something that you can actively look for. Not what your character says, but how they move, how they stand, how they breathe, and how it feels when they pause. And you can ask yourself, is their body responding before their thoughts catch up? That's actually a really common response. Writing dread ethically, or maintaining reader trust. This is where we return to something we touched on earlier this evening. Dread can be powerful, but it requires care. If you remove too much clarity or detail, the reader can become disoriented. If you withhold too much information, the reader can feel disconnected. So the balance you're aiming for is this: uncertainty in the situation, but clarity in how it's experienced. The reader may not know what's coming, but they should understand where they are in the story, who is present, and what the characters are actually feeling. That's why grounding elements matter so much. This could be Jared's presence, Callista's touch, or the consistent environment of the mountain and the Durza estate itself. These aren't just character or setting details, they're stabilizers. They allow dread to exist without overwhelming the reader. Okay, I'm slouching. Fixing my posture before Wraith yells at me. Alright. Common pitfalls. Yes, I know. I did it before you yelled at me. But that's what the commands are for. So you can yell at me because I'm notoriously bad about that. There are a few things that can weaken rising dread if you're not careful as a writer. 1. Escalating too quickly. If the threat becomes visible too soon, you lose the slow build and the tension. 2. Over-explaining the tension. If the character immediately understands what's wrong, the reader processes it too quickly.
How?
Yes, well timed, thank you. I can't hear those, but I hope you guys can. At least it's showing up on the screen now. Vocabulary? Oh boy. I don't know if I have anything. Let me...
Hello there.
Divine, welcome in. Haven't seen you in a hot minute. It's good to see you back here. Can I get a shout out for Divine Miscreant, please? I am so glad to see you back. I missed seeing you. I hope you're well and having an awesome Easter if you celebrate. Daily vocabulary. Do I have one? Maybe? Maybe. You know what? There are a couple of streamers that I try to show up pretty religiously to their streams, and it's really hard because some of them stream during the day and I'm at work. So I feel you on that one, Daz. Welcome in, Silverin Vassal. Welcome into the stream. My name is Meshla, for anybody who just wandered in, and I'm a long-form storyteller and fanfiction writer. So welcome into my little corner of Twitch. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I can't fix the fact that I'm in East Coast time. Tonight, for those of you who just came in, tonight what we're focusing on is one of our workshops focusing on writing Rising Dread without action. I know, right? We have been getting so much rain lately. It is ridiculous. Do you want some? I can try to send some your way. So much rain. I mean, it's good because we've actually been in drought out here, so it's kind of helping. Yes, it is definitely good for all the plants. And our well too, because we've actually been in drought out here since last summer. Oh, dude. I'm kind of glad I'm not out there right now if it's 100 degrees. Yikes. Alright. Yeah. It was like 50 yesterday. Oof, yeah. That's crazy. Well, April out here is actually behaving like April should, I guess. Alright. I'm actually focusing on, we're, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the workshop, but I've actually been focusing more on, that's an excellent question. I've actually been focusing a lot on, like, what the characters do and, like, what they might be thinking rather than what they actually say, which is what this workshop actually talks about. This video, the VOD from tonight, will actually be up on YouTube probably sometime tomorrow. So if you would like to check that out, since you came in a little bit late to the stream, those will definitely be up sometime tomorrow. But Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I really try to do it through like the environment and like the things that aren't said, like what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and how like the environment and the people around them kind of react. Um, so right now we're talking about uh, common pitfalls in writing Rising Dread. 3. Lack of variation. If every character reacts the same way, the scene begins to feel flat. Dread often works best when it's reflected differently across multiple perspectives. So Greer might react one way. He's the kind of protector, whereas Jared is the grounding presence for Marin, so he would react a little differently and probably a little calmer, quieter to help her settle. 4. The removal of grounding elements. That's correct. That's correct. Pacing and it's definitely through pacing and the things that are actually happening in the scene rather than action and plot advancement. We were talking about that earlier, actually. It's really about what's happening in the scene and the room rather than what, the action things that people might expect. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, give or take. Removal of grounding elements. If there's nothing stable in the scene, the reader can become overwhelmed or disengaged. And 7. A simple revision or editing lens. If you're revisiting a scene and want to strengthen the sense of dread, you can try something like this. On your first pass, remove the resolution. Look for moments where tension is resolved too quickly, and let them linger. I often feel that if a scene is resolved too quickly, it feels really abrupt. So you want to be able to like stretch that out a little bit. Pass 2. Add micro misalignments. Introduce small inconsistencies. Not enough to break the scene, but enough to create unease. Pass 3. Adjust your pacing. Slow down your key moments and give space for observation. Actually, this is a thing. We were actually just talking about that. Pass 4. Strengthen your anchors. Make sure that there is at least one element in the scene that grounds the reader or the protagonist. This kind of revision is not about adding more, it's about adjusting what's already there. You might extend the scene a little bit, you might add more detail to what the characters are doing, but it's really not about making the scene longer just for the sake of it. From what I do know of your stories, Wraith, I think you actually just kind of hit it on the head. That's a challenging thing to do as a first-time writer, but when this is your wow, I can't English today. For your particular instance, I would say, since this is your first time writing like this, take it like one chapter at a time and really kind of look at it and see, is there a scene or a couple of scenes in this chapter that feel too abrupt, and think about ways that you can kind of expand the scene out a little bit, maybe kind of give a lead up to that dread that you're trying to build earlier in the chapter or earlier in the story, so that it's not just kind of suddenly there. That's something that I've definitely been trying to work on. I hope that helps. And Wraith, I can definitely make the notes available for you if you'd like, since you are in the midst of writing. We have about a minute left. I'm gonna try to get through a little bit of this section. 8. Adapting across genres. This technique isn't limited to one type of story. In fantasy or sci-fi, it might look like this. Subtle shifts in environment or pattern, which is what we're seeing in Marin's story, or changes in behavior that don't match known rules or how the character might behave. In contemporary or character-driven work, you might see it as emotional hesitation, strained interactions with other characters, or a quiet awareness of something unspoken. In a mystery or thriller, you would see inconsistencies in the information, or characters recognizing patterns that don't align. I will get back to your comment as soon as we're back from the ad break, Silverin, if you don't mind. We're about to be in an ad in like 5 seconds. Please go get yourselves a drink of water, have a stretch. I will see you in a minute and a half. Welcome back from the ad break, my friends. I do hope you actually took the opportunity to go get a drink of water or have a stretch or grab a snack, because honestly, that's why they're there. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the stream, I can't control the fact that we have ad breaks, but hey, make what use of them you will. So that's a really great point. Where the emotion is quantified, but one character completely breaks the pattern. That is something that I've been playing with a little bit. It's... I don't know. A lot of what we've been touching on and what a lot of these chapters for Steps into the Past actually touch on is sensations for the protagonist, who is Marin, and how like the people around her react to it. For her, she's been dealing with a lot the last several chapters, and so she's having a really hard time kind of, I guess, reintegrating, for lack of a better term. So there's been a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 chapters that we've been looking at where she tries to get back into routine, and she's having some, emotional kind of reactions or flashbacks to things that happened. And I've spent a lot of time trying to have characters like Jared or Ethan or even Greer kind of react to that in different ways, but also act as a kind of a grounding element for her with everything that's been going on. Welcome in to Sniper. So I hope that answers your question. As always, feel free to ask questions in chat. I will try to answer them to the best of my ability, of course. And definitely feel free to check out some of the previous workshop recordings on YouTube if you're interested. They disappear from Twitch after a while, so I try to keep them up on YouTube for anybody who is interested in checking them out. But definitely always feel free to ask questions in chat, and I will answer them as best as I am able to. All right. Sorry, I was trying to remember where I was. Blonde moment. But even across all of these different genres, the core remains the same. There is awareness before confirmation. And as we move into our next section, we're going to slow things down yet again. Not to really analyze, but to reflect. Oh my god, Wraith. Sir. I see what you did there. Yes, I will fix my posture. Also, Daz, let me go find a vocabulary for you. Give me just a second while I go find that. Take a break from our discussion for a second. I'll go find your vocabulary. Oh dear. Was I? Jeez. Yeah, it's a bad habit of mine. I need to quit that. It's a very bad habit of mine. You know what? I just found one that I don't think I have touched on, which actually kind of relates to what we're talking about a little bit tonight. So Daz, this is for you since you redeemed vocabulary. Right, there's your posture check. Daily vocabulary. Okay. So Daz, this is for you, but hopefully everybody else will find it interesting. So the term that I found for you guys tonight is Sael Tenevaris, which literally means rest in quiet. The intent is it's kind of a benediction spoken to offer calm, safety, and a release from burden. It's neither a farewell nor a command. It is instead permission to rest. The phrase arises from early mountain settler lullabies on Catan, which is a fan-created planet, where Sayaltena, rest now, combined with Varus, quiet night or night-held silence. Over time, it becomes a cultural shorthand for safe rest under watch. In civilian, there are different versions for civilian, military, and temple usage. For civilians and the everyday population of Catan, it's often spoken to children, elders, or exhausted travelers. In temples or the Praxium, it's offered by priests of the Lady to the grieving or recovering, or knights or masters at the Praxium. In the military, it's often used sparingly, only toward the wounded, the shaken, or those coming off a long watch. There are a few variants and subforms. Sayaltena Adren, which means rest now, little flame. It is reserved for someone who is exhausted or hurting. It's a term of solace, not of diminishment of what they've been feeling. And it has a bit of cultural weight. The phrase implies 3 assurances: that you are safe, that the night is quiet, and that you do not carry this watch alone. Those last words matter the most in Catani culture. There is a social and familial context. Parents, guardians, or caretakers say Sayaltena Varus to the overtired. Among adults, it signals closeness without intrusion. It's a way to honor someone's exhaustion without calling attention to it. In a spiritual context, priests may speak it during rites for the weary, vigils after a long grief, or moments where words would burden rather than soothe. It is considered a gentle invocation of the Lady's silent road. In marine culture, Greer would use it rarely, only when someone is truly beyond their limits. Jared would whisper it at close range, and Ethan would speak it softly from a doorway while he's keeping watch. Veil units treat it as a non-operational emotional benediction. It carries no code weight. And there's different meanings for civilian, temple, military, or veil. For those who are unfamiliar, Veil Code is a system of communication that I kind of invented for my little corner of the universe over here. It's kind of a cross between military like code signs and Morse code, depending on if it's the manual version or the haptics, which is basically Morse code. Sir, thank you for that 3-stream streak. I appreciate you. Thank you. Oh. So there's a little bit too, it talks a little bit about how there's like a gesture associated with it where like for civilian use it would be like you're kind of like lowering your hand, kind of telling somebody to be calm, and in haptic or Morse code, if you will, it's short, long, that's the form that we're using, which is rest, watch, held. It's generally not used in field operations. Oh, sorry. We also have some cultural origins for it, if you like. There is a there's a hearth tale that is often told. There's a tale shared of a mountain watcher who soothed frightened children during storm season by saying, "Sail Tana Veris, the storm cannot find you here." There are also some proverbs that kind of relay this as well. Such as, "Night keeps what we entrust to it, rest honors the weary, and quiet is a shield as strong as stone." Alrighty. So that is your vocabulary for the day. Yes, I am entirely being a nerd and creating a language for my stories, which has absolutely no ties to anything else in Star Wars, because that's just how I am. I'll eventually create a written form, but I haven't gotten there yet. Right now, I'm just working on vocabulary and lore, so hope you guys find that interesting, because I honestly feel that this one kind of relates a little bit to what we've been talking about this evening with Rising Dread, because a lot of what we're talking about with Rising Dread is just the things that are left unsaid, and just the emotions kind of in the room. Okay. Alrighty. So, trying to remember where I left off. Oh my goodness. Oh yes. As we are redirecting to our discussion on writing Rising Dread, I'd like you to think about this question. You don't have to answer it out if you don't want to, just something for you to consider as you're thinking about the things that you're writing or a scene that you might want to write or potentially revise. In a scene that you've written or are considering writing, where could tension begin earlier before anything visibly changes? Right. Now we're going to move into a bit of Q&A or a guided discussion. As always, please feel free to stick questions in chat. They don't have to necessarily be related to what we're talking about, but so we're going to shift into something a little quieter. This isn't really a space that requires you to answer in chat or even have an answer. It's not a space that asks you to instantly understand. Instead, it's a place and a space to let the ideas we've been working with simply settle, to sit with them for a moment and to see where they might connect to your own writing or where they don't yet. Some of you might be thinking through your current projects. Some of you might be listening loosely and letting things take shape over time. And some of you might simply be lurking and just listening to my voice, which is completely fine too. Those are valid. So rather than any formal questions, I'm going to offer a few guided reflections. You're welcome to answer in chat if you like, or you can simply sit with them. 1. Recognizing the early signs of dread. The first thing to consider is this. When you look at your own writing, where does your tension actually begin? Not where it peaks, not where the action happens, but where the dread first takes root. Is it tied to a piece of information, a shift in the environment, or a character's internal response, their thoughts, their emotions, even a physical sensation? Or does it only appear once something clearly goes wrong? Sometimes we discover that tension is already present earlier than we realized. It just hasn't been given space yet. 2. The role of instinct. Another quiet question to sit with. Do your characters recognize something is wrong before they understand it or can name it? In chapters 15 and 16, much of the dread comes from instinct, a sense of patterns, and a feeling of misalignment. Characters don't always articulate it or give it voice, but they often adjust their behavior in response to what's going on. In your own work, you might ask, are your characters allowed to feel something before they can even explain it? 3. Holding versus resolving. This next one is especially useful as you're revising or editing your scenes. When tension appears in your scene, what do you do with it? Do you resolve it quickly? Do you explain it? Or do you move past it? Or do you allow it to remain unresolved for a time, a scene or two, or most of the chapter? There's no single correct answer, but if everything resolves immediately, the reader never gets to sit in that space of uncertainty. And that space of uncertainty is where dread lives. 4. Emotional anchors. As the tension increases, something else becomes important. Stability. In the chapters we've been studying tonight, even as dread builds, there's always anchors present. Jared's steady presence, Callista's calm care, Greer's watchfulness, and the consistent environment of the mountain. So a question to consider. What grounds your scenes when tension rises? What allows the reader to stay connected even when uncertainty increases? 5. Shared awareness. Here is one final reflection to sit with. Do your characters experience tension in isolation, or does awareness begin to spread between them? When multiple characters start responding to that same unease, even in different ways, the emotional weight of the scene deepens. It becomes harder to dismiss and harder to ignore, and that shared awareness can often be more powerful than a single character's realization. We'll let those settle for a moment. This part of the process, the quiet thinking, the noticing, the small adjustments, is often where the most meaningful changes in writing begin, not in your drafting, but in the awareness that follows. Yes. Yes. As we prepare to move into our closing tonight, you might consider this. What is one moment in your writing where you could allow tension to linger just a little longer before resolving it? And as always, please feel free to drop questions in chat. And if you'd like to find me on socials, we can do this. I think this is it. Oh, I can't type today, good grief. There we go. As we come to the end of our workshop this evening, I want to return to something simple. Dread isn't something you force into a story. It's something that emerges as the story progresses, often quietly, gradually, and often before you realize it's there. In chapters 15 and 16, nothing overtly breaks. There's no battle that begins. There's no confrontation that unfolds. And yet by the end of the chapters, everything feels different. The characters move differently, they speak more carefully, and they watch more closely, and they hold on to more than they say. That's the work of Rising Dread. Not disruption, not combat, but tightening. And what makes it effective is not just the presence of the unease, but the presence of care alongside it. Jared's grounding without forcing, Callista's healing without pressing for information, and Greer watching without intruding, and Aran reinforcing without overwhelming. These elements matter because they allow the tension to exist without breaking the reader's sense of safety. This is what it means to write dread ethically, to let the storm gather without abandoning the people inside it. As you move back into your own work, whether that's drafting, revising, or simply thinking about the story, you don't need to add more. You don't need to create something new. Often what you're looking for is already in the scene. A moment that feels slightly off, a pause that ends too quickly, and a space that could hold just a little bit more weight. And sometimes the work is simply letting that moment remain. We have an ad starting at about 5 minutes. I think I can get through the last bit here in a little pressure in 5 minutes. Wow, I can't English. Here is some optional homework. I use that term lightly. There is absolutely no pressure, just some thinking points for you guys as you work through your stories. So if you'd like something gentle to take with you, here are a few options. You can do one. You can do none. You can simply think about them. All of that counts. The almost right pass. Take a scene that you've already written. Look for a moment that feels stable. Now ask yourself, what could be slightly off here without breaking the scene? Adjust one small detail and don't explain it. 2. The pause extension. Find a moment where tension appears and resolves quickly. Instead of resolving it, add one pause, one breath, one hesitation. Let the character notice something before moving on in the scene. Oh, sorry. 3. The environmental echo check. Choose a setting you've used more than once. Ask yourself, how does this space feel different now compared to earlier scenes in the chapter or the story? Without changing the setting, adjust how it's described or experienced by your characters. 4. Posture and presence. Revisit a scene and focus only on physical behavior. No dialogue, not internal thoughts, just how the characters stand, where they look or who they look at, and when they hesitate. Let those changes carry the tension in the scene. Dread doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need volume, and it definitely doesn't need spectacle. It only needs a moment where something feels different, and no one can quite explain why. I am very grateful for all of you who are here this evening, whether you're new, or whether you're returning after a long absence, or whether you're here often. I appreciate each and every one of you who was here this evening, and thank you for spending this time in the archives tonight. I hope that the rest of your Easter is pleasant and calm if you celebrate, and I hope that the rest of the start of your week goes well. As always, if you would like to check out previous workshops or other stream content, you can find that on YouTube. And if you'd like to know when I stream, please feel free to follow the channel. I would appreciate that. Have an awesome evening, you guys, and take care of yourselves. Make sure you drink lots of water and take your meds, because I'm gonna go do that. Have a great night, you guys. I will see you on Wednesday for a storytime stream. Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Have a good night, you guys.